So we're just coming up on 11:30 New York time. I don't know what time that is on the West Coast, but I'm very happy to have Jacob Simmons here, who's head of West Coast for West Coast US for Broadgate. And just a very quick background. We were speaking with Broadgate a few months ago about them joining us as with a panel at this cyber event. And they very much embarrassed me in my old age and rigid way of thinking that I realized that we hadn't thought of diversity in cyber as a topic for this event. So I realized the error of my ways, and we're really happy to have Jacob and co on board today to bring us through this. I'm going to, I have to say the discussions we had ahead of this have been very interesting and a great education for me. So I'm going to hand over to Jacob. And once again, thank you to our friends in Broadgate for what they're going to bring us through today.
Hello, hi Justin. Thanks for having us. We're very excited to get started today. I think we've got our panelists waiting in the wings, but just to, I suppose, take over from your point. So yeah, thanks for having us. This is a little bit of a look into decrypting diversity at the leadership level in cybersecurity. So, you know, a really important topic with regards to the industry on a whole, but we've got some real cybersecurity superstars on our panel joining us today, and we'll be probing a little bit into, you know, kind of their career background and journey, some of the challenges that they faced, and you know, and some of the paths that they've forged into reaching cybersecurity leadership. And on the whole, we'll be covering a little bit more about what that means in terms of, you know, the importance to the market, the importance in terms of retention and growth, and also the ability for companies, you know, to be able to serve their market and their customer base by taking diversity into consideration. So I will pause for a moment whilst our panelists join, and we'll kick off from there. Good morning, all. So a little bit earlier on the West Coast over here. Jen, I know you're over this side as well. 8:30 a.m. just getting kicked off, and 11:30 East Coast. So just to kind of pick up on proceedings then. So I'll hand over to everyone to do a round of introductions, preferred pronouns, name, background about what you're doing. I'll kind of take the lead. So my name is Jacob Simmons. I head up the West Coast cybersecurity recruiting team for Broadgate Search West Coast. My pronouns are he, him, and I will pass on to Jen, who's on my right.
Nice. Well, thank you, Jacob. I really appreciate being here. My name is Jen Olmsted. I am the co-founder and chief business officer of a company by the name of Citrix Cyber. I have spent the last 20 plus years in the cybersecurity space, legal space, and the last 5 years in the cybersecurity space, working with clients who have proactive issues or have instant response issues. I formed my company with my business partner about a year ago, and I go by they, them.
Thanks, Jen. Great to have you here.
Thank you.
I'll pass it over to Rose.
Everybody, my name is Rose Songer. I am the Director of Compliance and IT at Spring Health. Spring Health is a mental health company looking to use data to get people the right mental health services that they need. My background, I've been in my field since I was 18. I joined the military, did that for 8 years, and then became a security analyst and did all the education and things like that to kind of build my career. Got really passionate about diversity and cybersecurity probably a couple years ago when I was consistently the only woman at work, and realized that we really had a gap in the diverse thoughts and everything. So now I'm a mentor with cybersecurity, or a mentor with women in cybersecurity, and run a diversity and tech group at my organization. And I've done a couple other things that I'm sure we'll talk about today. And my pronouns are she, her.
Thanks, Rose. I'll pass on over to Andrew as well.
Yeah, thank you very much, Jacob. Andrew Abadia, I'm the CISO at Cobalt, responsible for information security and IT. Cobalt is a PTAS company. Pen test is what we do. I've had close to 25 years in cybersecurity. I started my career in risk management with KPMG. Since then, I've been in security. Very excited to be here to talk about diversity in cybersecurity.
Thanks, Andrew. And lastly, but certainly not leastly, over to John.
Hey everyone, John Mitchell, CISO and Head of DevOps for Nextech AR. Been doing cybersecurity for about 20 years, bridging between engineering and security. And I got a real interest in diversity and inclusiveness about 8 years ago when we tried to hire some lead engineering roles, and we got 150 applications and they were very non-diverse. We had 0 women apply, and it was a kind of eye-opening experience at that point. Pronouns are he, him, and excited to talk about this today.
Well, thank you all. I suppose let's just kind of jump straight in, really. So, starting from the top, leadership in cybersecurity. So from the sort of, from the get-go, I guess, what do you think sort of diverse cybersecurity professionals struggle to kind of do to make the jump into senior positions from, just sort of entry levels, or just kind of, on the whole, what is it that people kind of face as a typical barrier to reaching seniority within the cybersecurity space, would you say? And I'll open the floor to any.
I'll jump in. I think that from my perspective, I was being my own blocker for a really long time. I kept thinking to myself, why am I not getting selected for a leadership position? Like, I was putting that responsibility on the other person to recognize me for my hard work. But it wasn't until I started advocating for my own career and making myself uncomfortable with advocating for myself, because it's hard to be, I know I can do this and talk to your leadership and everything. And so once I started advocating for myself, that is actually when I made the jump into leadership positions. And I did that showing what I've done in the past and the things that I bring to the table. And so by advocating for myself, I got 4 promotions within a 2-year time span because I was able to demonstrate and advocate for myself. But unfortunately, I think a lot of people struggle with having the courage to advocate for themselves, or even having an ally to advocate for them to be able to get into these leadership positions.
Yes.
Yeah, I mean, I would agree with Rose. I think self-advocacy, it's good, but also the organizational structure also certainly helps, right? So the more diverse your leadership group is, certainly gives you the impetus to push further, and also having the right skill set for whatever it is you're looking to do. So if you're qualified and you demonstrate the skill set and you continue to work hard, I think it'll come to you. But I think organizationally, if the organization supports diversity and they really value the input that a diverse group will bring to your organization, then it certainly becomes a much more of a possible promotion for you if you push it in those regards. So I think the organizational structure, if diversity is valued within the organization, certainly makes it a lot more easier for you to ascend to that leadership role.
Interesting point.
Yeah.
Sorry, Jen, please continue.
Yeah, I'd like to piggyback on that, because I think that there is a lot of self-advocacy that you have to bring to the table, because and it's not just because you should actually inherently just be considered for those positions. You should, but I think that oftentimes we put it on ourselves and say we don't deserve that position, so I'm not going to go for it, or I'm not going to put my name in the hat. So we're almost, shooting ourselves in the foot, because we're the ones who are actually getting in our way, not the fact that we represent a diverse group of people, but because as a result of that, we have our own, our own stuff that we have to deal with in order to move ahead. So, the thing that really happened for me was the second I said, I can't live a lie anymore. I have to be who I am. And if that means that it's going to tank my career, it's going to tank my career. And when I started being authentically me, the reverse happened. People are like, now I get you. Now I understand who you are as a person, and you're being really honest, just like we're really honest with you. So I think oftentimes it's the fear, it just gets in our way. And if you can, overcome that fear and push yourself to really go for it, there are huge opportunities out there.
Yeah, and I think just to add on to that, I think one of the limitations right now in the industry is there's a lot of negative interactions as well around discrimination, which puts people off from applying for those roles. I mean, if you look at Glassdoor in 2019, they did a diversity and inclusiveness study, and 61% of people in companies identified in the study identified as either experiencing or witnessing discrimination based on age, gender, race, or LGBTQI+ statuses. And I think if people are having a negative interaction in any way, shape, or form in the company, that puts people off from stepping forward and trying to fill those roles as well.
Yeah. No, I would totally agree with that. I mean, to be perfectly honest, I didn't work for a company that actually had an employee resource group until about 2015. Like, it was my first interaction with it. And I was like, oh my God, what is this? This is really cool. People are encouraging people who are in diverse situations or diverse backgrounds. And it was unfortunate because it reminded me of all the other companies I'd worked for that didn't have that initiative. So it's got to be a give and a take. I mean, you have to work for a company that really supports that, and then you have to go for it as well.
Those are some really interesting points that you've raised, in particular around the self-advocacy and advocacy versus allyship, conversation, which I think I'd love to delve into as well during this discussion. Just kind of leading off those points that you mentioned there about almost the pattern that's being noted in terms of discrimination and I suppose how kind of inclusiveness can be interwoven into the business from like a top-down perspective in terms of leadership. I suppose why is it important to have diversity from that sort of top-down? How does that kind of affect an organization, I suppose, at large in terms of combating some of those points around kind of discrimination or perhaps creating an environment where people feel that they're or they're stepping into an inclusive place that will be reflective of kind of their, I suppose, themselves and kind of their outlooks and perceptions and things like that. How can the top-down kind of leadership, side of things kind of affect that, I suppose?
I mean, your leadership group is a reflection of your organization, right? So I've known, colleagues of mine when going through the hiring process, and they take the time to look at the leadership group, right? If you don't see folks that look like you, the incentive is certainly not there for you to want to push, right? It reflects on how the organization is set up. So, I mean, the more diverse the leadership team is, certainly will give more impetus to folks within the organization to aspire to go higher within the organization. And statistics have also shown that the more diverse the organization is, they tend to make more money, right? There are companies that will research your diversity structure before they want to do business with you. The other companies that have less turnovers due to the diverse structure. So there's tremendous benefit for the organization to have a diverse team, not just only at the leadership level, but also within the organization. So, I mean, as we move into this atmosphere where diversity is becoming much more prominent, there are business initiative that is strictly based on how diverse our organization is. I've been in discussions where people wouldn't even want to do business with you because your company does not reflect the structure or diversity, the respect your organization to have. So I think the more companies realize that, I think there's going to be more emphasis on the diversity in the organization and bringing different perspective and thought process into your leadership structure.
I think that's such an interesting point because there's two sides in my mind. There's the companies who are getting pressured to have a solid diversity and inclusion group or initiative because this company who's a big player or big revenue stream for them isn't going to do business with them unless they put that in place. And I appreciate that. And I can see like there are a lot of companies that start building out initiatives around diversity and inclusion because of that. But in my mind, that's the wrong reason. I don't want to lose my revenue from this company. Therefore, I'm going to build out diversity and inclusion. And initiatives. So like, to me, there's a difference between an ally and somebody who's just, walking through the motions just to help out. But I also think, and something I'm not particularly psyched about talking about is that it is harder. You really do have to put yourself out there more. You do have to be way more vocal to get these initiatives going. You can't just wait for them to, happen all of a sudden. And I had to learn that lesson, halfway through my career. But people have to really take the initiative to say, yeah, we need this type of program, and we need to support people who don't necessarily get looked at for leadership opportunities just because of who they represent or what they represent, but that's not okay. And so there needs to be more people who say, oh, okay, wait a minute, I'm just as qualified as that other guy. You need to give me a shot.
So I have 2 points to Jen's kind of dialogue there. So one of them, I love working at Spring Health because our mission is to eliminate barriers to mental health. And one of the ways that we do that is by having a very diverse workforce. And it's not for like revenue or the bottom line or anything. It is because our patients come from such diverse backgrounds. And when they're looking for therapists or support or coaching, they want to be able to select somebody that comes from a same background, same diversity, same gender, whatever it is. And so the mission there to eliminate barriers is also demonstrated through our diverse workforce and able to kind of remove those barriers. And I love that. I love that it's not about the bottom line. It's not about, trying to get more revenue or win contracts because we have a diverse workforce and we're doing all these initiatives. It really is because of our patients and being able to provide them like good support. Now on the flip side of like having these groups, let's say ERG or diversity and tech group or whatever, and having these opportunities, as leadership, what we should be doing is giving our teams enough capacity and bandwidth to actually go pursue these. If you have their bucket so full of work that they're close to burnout, they are not going to be able to take care of themselves. Self-care is doing these activities, taking care of their professional growth and things like that. And if they're close to burnout, they're not going to take care of themselves in that way. And then your organization is going to be in a perpetual state of not having the right diverse thoughts, right groups happening because they just don't have enough bandwidth to actually go do those things.
Yeah, totally. Can I just jump in for 1 second? The one thing I forgot to mention is you asked the question around diversity and the importance of having that within your organization. And I read an article recently that was talking about just that very thing, having diversity within your teams, because therefore you can have different ideas bouncing off one another from different, walks of life, different perspectives, which will eventually help you get to the ultimate solution that you need to create. And I work in incident response. You need to create solutions really quickly and be able to have a lot of different perspectives when you're going in and thinking about, okay, how did they infiltrate the network? What type of data did they get? What's the remediation, et cetera, et cetera. You need to have people who come from totally different, diverse backgrounds, because the hackers have people from completely different backgrounds and they're working together to infiltrate these systems. So you can't have the same looking person, working on these matters, trying to help people get out of those situations.
Yeah, I would just add to that. I mean, I completely agree with that. Cybersecurity by its very nature requires thinking outside the box, right? So having that different perspective being brought in certainly helps. And as Jen just said, yes, hackers are coming from different parts, right? So if you have a very isolated group, obviously they're not going to be able to understand and the background and the mindset that might be informing some of those hacking activities. But if you have a broad set of background, different views, different folks from different parts of the globe, they can certainly come up with ideas and will ultimately lead to better decision-making process within the team. So I certainly agree with the benefit of having very diverse perspective and bringing different views from having a diverse group certainly helps your decision-making process.
I think the other important thing is to encourage diversity. It's almost like a snowball rolling downhill. the more diverse your workforce is, the easier it is to grow in a diverse workforce as well. I think I was reading a study pretty recently, and it was saying about 32% of 32% of applicants would not work at a company that did not have a diverse background to start with. That's, you know, a difficult challenge to start with, because you need a diverse background to encourage diversity hiring. But once you start to get there, I think it becomes easier and easier. And I noticed even internally, the more diverse we are as a workforce in our company, the easier it has been to encourage more people to apply.
Some really, really poignant insight onto not only the importance of having a diverse culture, but putting the best foot forward for the right reason. So obviously not a revenue-driven or a box-ticking motivation, but a genuine shift in paradigm of thought, I suppose. And obviously what that leads to is being able to serve your market in a more holistic way, I suppose. You know, from that point that you've mentioned there, John, as well. So in terms of bridging the gap to that talent, and, you know, across the board, you know, you've all sort of really highlighted quite poignantly where if there isn't a diverse set of thought or train of thought, I suppose, in terms of how you can affect, you know, the threat landscape for customers or clients, etc., you know, you're massively underserving, you know, your client base. But aside from that, I mean, where do we start in terms of bridging the gap with that talent and really kind of shifting towards that sort of genuine change in mindset and culture? Like, as a business, where do we start with bridging that gap towards talent and you know, I suppose the opening of the funnel towards entering into the organization from that standpoint?
Yeah, I mean, for us at Cobalt, we have diversity and inclusion group, and it's driven by our people team, and that's also incorporated into our hiring process. So organizationally, we're doing a lot to improve diversity within the organization. I think that's helped. And even from a hiring perspective, we also we're not just focused on a particular group. We look at talent, we look at skill set, but we also look at, you know, broadening the group and deliberately hiring folks that will broaden our diversity structure within the organization. So I think that's a good way for most organizations to start developing a diversity and inclusion group and allowing people to bring different thoughts and ideas to that process. I think that's what we're doing organizationally, and I think most organizations are also taking the same initiative to do that as well, to improve their diversity structure within the organization.
I think it's important to ask the difficult questions as well, especially of your own organization, which, you know, can be a challenge. Like, why are we not diverse in this area, or why are we struggling here and there? And I think, you know, there's various tools you can use to ask those questions. You know, you can create scorecards, you can create KPIs, whatever. But I think even starting that conversation is a very important beginning.
Yeah, I mean, for my company, we are founded on the belief that diversity is a huge part of our initiative. And we're not a big team because we're a fairly new company, but we are minority owned company. So it's important for us to expand on that and see, you know, how can we help other people get into the field? I believe that people who have diverse backgrounds have a lot better skill sets when it comes to managing data and manipulating data. So that's 100% part of our initiative. And we work with recruiting firms that have that as part of their initiative, because if they didn't, then our values wouldn't align and we wouldn't be able to work together.
Rose?
Yeah, so I would echo what everybody else is saying. Like, at our organization, people operations has developed, you know, our pipelines where we're looking at diversity and inclusion throughout a candidate's entire life cycle, going through the process. So I won't harp too much on that, but I will say that looking outside of the organization and figuring out how can I help entry-level people get into a position where they can actually apply, and helping them navigate whether or not a company is actually, you know, one that they should apply to based on, you know, their own values and what they believe that they're looking for. And so, you know, working with people by mentoring or coaching, or, you know, collaborating within the InfoSec community. So not only are you targeting getting more diverse people through your own hiring pipelines at your organization, but you're also working outside of your organization for entry level or maybe mid-career level or even senior people to get into organizations that actually support what they're looking for as far as diversity goes.
Yeah, I completely agree with that. Having those networking events within and outside of cybersecurity certainly helps. I mean, I was reading an article one time that said, if there's a job description that listed 10 key requirements for that job, most women want to have all 10 before they apply, whereas guys or men will be confident applying with just 5 of those skill sets. So having this type of networking event to encourage women to still apply, because there's a lot that go into hiring process beyond just having all of the key requirements of that job. So interacting with you during the interview process could certainly influence a hiring manager, even though you don't have all of the 10 items listed in that job description. So having networking events that would encourage women, to look beyond just what the job requires. Obviously, having a skill set is critical, but also, having the ability to engage and discuss with the hiring manager can certainly influence them in ways beyond what you can do. So just isolating yourself or taking yourself out of the mix because you feel you don't have all of the 10 things requested for that position is not always a good thing. So having networking events like was just stated certainly helps to encourage folks outside of the cybersecurity to be able to go in and just believe that it's not all technical. There's several aspects of cybersecurity that is not as technical that you can apply for. So I think those networking events certainly will help in that regard as well.
Yeah.
And from all of your experience as well, on that point of sort of networking groups, I suppose maybe advocacy groups in some cases, or again, that kind of brings us to that conversation around advocating, advocacy or allyship, etc. What's I suppose, and I feel that perhaps Rose, you're in a great position to kind of give us an example there. But in terms of from your experience, where you've seen the difference between where there's an advocacy group that's more active, or perhaps a group of allyship group that's helping but isn't perhaps in position to support in the same way. Where would you kind of identify that trade-off? And I suppose where would be the value in terms of what you would recommend to, for instance, people, you've been obviously very sort of self-forging in terms of your path into industry and persistent, but from a look-back perspective, where would you see that sort of networking piece could come into play for sort of people that are looking to reach that senior leadership level within security in the market?
Yeah, so that's like a super loaded question that I'm probably not going to be able to answer all of. So I think that'll be a collaborative approach from this whole panel. So from my perspective, when I was going through my career, I had allies and my male counterparts that were like, yes, more women need to be in security, or more diverse people need to be in security, but none of those people were actually advocating or taking action for, making these changes. Yes, it's all good to say, oh yeah, we need more people, we need more women, we need more people of color, we need whatever. But no one was actually taking any action, which was resulting in blockers in my own career. So I took the action. I said, I'm going to start presenting at conferences. I'm going to start advocating for my own career. I'm going to start mentoring other women in cybersecurity who are entry level that cannot get into governance, risk, and compliance. I'm going to start doing all of these things in order to advocate for having diverse people in cybersecurity, or even diverse people in technology, because that's where I've actually been navigating more now, working with so many engineers and things like that for Spring Health. And so for my career, I always had the challenge of not having somebody in my corner, not having a mentor, not having a coach, not having leadership that was in my corner. Several years ago, I had a director that was over me, and I asked my director, like, I want to get into leadership. Can I start shadowing you? And I was blown off, and look at me now, I'm a director. And it's because I eventually found mentors and coaches and the things that I needed in my career. And those people were advocating for me to get to where I needed to go.
Yeah.
So I don't know if that answers all of your question, but I'm sure my panel counterparts can jump in.
Yeah, perhaps somebody could step in, but thanks for that. That was I appreciate that was a fairly hefty topic there. So a great inroad. But yeah, I'll hand over to the panel as well.
No, I agree with Rose completely. I think mentorship is key. I certainly wouldn't be where I am today if I had not had good mentors over the course of my career to shepherd me, to guide me, to kind of bounce ideas off of. It's always very important. It's not enough to have all of the skill set, but having somebody who's at that point who genuinely cares about your career and your ability to succeed in that certainly will be very helpful, because sometimes there are points you get to over the course of your career discouraged, but you need that person that can always encourage you, telling you how to go about things, running different ideas by them. So mentorship is certainly a key thing. Within outside of your organization, it's always important to have somebody and that you can look up to that will guide your career as you look to move up into the leadership role.
Yeah, I mean, I would second that. I mean, everything that you guys just said was so dead on. You know, when I was coming up through the ranks, I didn't really feel like I had a mentor or somebody who was really kind of pushing me ahead. And I had my head down and my blinders on, and I was so focused on me. I got to get ahead. I got to get ahead. And it's only been in the last couple of years that I kind of took a step back and I was like, wait a minute. There's all these other women who are behind me and all these other, you know, kids who identify as LGBTQ that need somebody who's a role model to kind of show them, pave the way. And maybe it was selfish just because I had never experienced it, that it didn't occur to me that that was something that was important to do. But, you know, that's why for me, I've been trying to get more visible and doing stuff like this and really getting my name out there, because it's not about me. It's about the people who are trying to get ahead and feel like they don't have any advocacy in the market. I want to be that person to help support and be, you know, that buffer.
I love that, Jen, like so much. It fills my bucket to know I'm enabling others to get to where they desire to get to in their career. And by doing things like this or mentoring or coaching or whatever, I'm taking the me out of it and looking at what can I do to lift you up, to get you where you are trying to get to. And what this is doing is changing our landscape for cybersecurity. The actions that we are taking right now are setting the stage for 2 years, 3 years, 5 years from now to truly shift to be more diverse within cybersecurity and technology. And I'm enabling all of these people to start making changes then. It has such a ripple effect that by saying something now, years down the road, it's truly going to be different. And it's just so great to see.
Yep.
Totally. I think it's super important to pay it forward as well. I'll be honest, I came from a lucky background. I had all the help in the world. I had great lawyers for immigration purposes. I had great mentors. I had, you know, every advantage possible. And I think there was a realization I had several years ago that I need to start paying forward this more, volunteering at code camps and helping other people out, because not everyone has those benefits. And I think it helps make the player field a little bit more even.
And I suppose on that point, in terms of, you know, the paying it forward, and I suppose from an organizational perspective, and this is open to the panel as well, but John, I'll start with you off the back of that point. But in terms of being able to then take a look at your businesses, plans for growth, your security organizations, plans for growth and scaling from a leadership perspective, how can, with, you know, such a complex topic, but something that needs to be addressed, you know, so desperately within security, how can a company address scaling in a diverse way in the market as is, and just in general at this time?
Did you say how can they address data?
Or how can a company address scaling at this point? So scaling in a diverse way at this time.
I mean, from my perspective, I think it's part of, you know, your recruitment expectations. You know, I wouldn't ever say, I only want to hire diverse people. I only want to talk to diverse people. That's not fair. And that's creating an issue on the back end. But it is important that the pool of people that you bring to the table are diverse, and they represent lots of different backgrounds and lots of different perspectives. That is, to me, far more important than, you know, saying, I'm only going to hire people who fall into this category because that's ridiculous. But it's also important to make sure that people know that, yes, we are inclusive and we want to bring people on board that have different backgrounds. And like I said, you know, you have a group of people, a project management team, for an example, who all have diverse backgrounds. You are going to get so many different perspectives. You'll be able to create a solution so much faster than if you have the same person sitting across the table, you know, 4 or 5 times.
I think it's also worth when you're putting out when you're hiring or trying to scale up for these roles, really question your list of requirements to see if it's actually a requirement. And a great example of that is degrees. You know, degrees are amazing things, but at the same time, not everyone can get one for a variety of different reasons, including financial background. So, and there's amazingly smart people out there. So it's definitely worth really checking to see if your needs requirements is going to be, you know, pairing people off before you actually want to do that.
Yeah, I think, you know, for us, it's just really expanding the pool that you select from, right? So I think you don't want to narrow it down off the bat to say, hey, I want this type of individual, this type of individuals, but expanding the pool of your applicants certainly gives you a broad feel for what's out there, and really try to accommodate that by looking in depth into all of these different folks that have applied without necessarily saying, hey, I want to emphasize the same group or whatever it is, but you want to be able to have a broad pool of folks to select with. And they're very talented people, very smart people that are minorities or in a diverse group, but sometimes they don't have the opportunity to even present themselves. So having that exposure, having that expanded pool of candidates to select from, certainly it's a good way to go. So we work closely with different groups using LinkedIn, using different platforms to ensure that you get a broader pool of candidates to select from, rather than using the established mediums for recruiting that is really narrow to a certain group of people. But when you expand the pool, and then you're able to really have a diverse group of folks to select from.
Yeah, and if I can jump in here, when we talk about scaling within cybersecurity, and we're talking about these pipelines and hiring and all these other things, but what also makes it a challenge when you're trying to scale and when you're trying to include diversity, cybersecurity traditionally has been an afterthought for most organizations. So not only are you battling getting budget and making sure that you can get headcount and all these other things, but you're also battling trying to get a diverse pool of candidates and making sure that you are doing all of those things on the other side. And so you're trying to navigate getting headcount and all like the factors there. You're trying to make sure that you're going to have enough work for the headcount that you get. And then you're also trying to figure out, can you get a diverse candidate pool to fill these roles and to keep everybody's buckets sufficiently full so that they're happy and fulfilled doing their job, and kind of tying into employee satisfaction there. So when you talk about scaling up, there's so many nuances that go in there, and diversity makes it even more challenging to kind of figure out how you're going to get to that endpoint of having, you know, a really diverse group to support the cybersecurity function.
Interesting commentary. So it's outside of just the fact of, you know, it's all of the unique challenges to security in terms of, you know, really getting that buy-in at perhaps a board or, you know, C-suite level in terms of budget and understanding of security's role within the organization as a whole. Perhaps is a separate paradigm to the cultural kind of you know, impact that the company's having on, or has internally, or outlook that it has. You know, I suppose then kind of tying into the again the advocacy piece, how and again from your own personal experiences, perhaps from a lack thereof, from what you'd seen there wasn't there before, from when you became coming into it to now, in terms of what you're seeing to arise or what you could affect. You know, how could you bridge the gap within addressing the issue of scaling a security department in line with adjusting the culture of a business overall and the mindset of the business? Is there any particular type of you know, initiatives perhaps you've rolled out in your organizations with regards to, you know, any particular, you know, groups or advocacy teams or anything like that? What's kind of some separate ways that you've sort of bridged that gap initially between security and culturally, and then helped to permeate, I suppose, a bit more of a lasting and effective change in the organization as a whole?
Yeah, I know. So I've been in my organization since November, and we started a diversity and tech group. So it encompasses engineering, it encompasses product, it encompasses IT, InfoSec, compliance, all these different groups. And so not only are you getting diverse thoughts because everybody has such different jobs, but we're doing this group for non-binary, trans, women. And so we have all these kind of diverse thoughts happening. And so we have that group, and then we have women in ERG, out, which is an ERG group for all of our LGBTQ community and things like that. And so we have several different groups that happen for supporting diversity within our workplace. So that's kind of how we're combating it. We do things like fireside chats. We have like very vulnerable and open sessions where we talk about what are the things that are blocking you to get into like the next step in your career. And so me and a counterpart run this diversity and tech group, and we have very candid discussions with all of the people that join on how to remove the blockers internally at the organization that leadership may not already be aware of. And so we do activities like having a Trello board or a Miro board, and we write down like the things that are blocking them from getting to the next level. And then my counterpart and I, who's a director in engineering, take this to the leadership level, and leadership are like, how do we make this change happen? So those are the groups. And then on the other side, what I've done from a risk management perspective is put a risk on our risk register, which tickles me endlessly because if you guys have never heard me talk about GRC, it is my favorite thing of all time, which is why I'm in compliance. We have a risk on our risk register that says, due to lack of diversity or whatever, this could lead to gaps in our program, and leveraging the resources available to us that comes inherently with my job to like push this forward. And so this gets communicated up the chain as well. So that's kind of a creative solution there to address diversity, because if it's on your risk register and it's a critical risk or a high risk and you follow your own processes, you have to do something to reduce the risk, right? So
very, very creative, Rose, I have to say, right?
Yeah.
I think for me, I would subscribe to, so we do have a DIE group that is highly supported at the highest level of the organization. I think that's helpful. And in those groups, they encourage thought, they encourage opinions, and that's all channeled to the top and incorporated into a hiring process. So I think having a strong, supported diversity and inclusion group and that is highly spread at the leadership level, at the exec level, certainly allows them to really touch on anything, right? And encourage input and feedback across the organization, and those feedback evaluated at the highest levels of the organization and then incorporated to the hiring process. Changes are made, but I think it's important to have that support of the leadership within the organization for that to truly be meaningful. It's one thing to just have a diversity and inclusion group, but if you don't have the support at the highest level, it's not really going to get anywhere. But if you have that support and it's encouraged and you have the backing of the executive team, then they could really take feedback, take all kinds of input from everyone, not just those folks that are impacted the most, but also folks that have opinions that may be helpful to enhance the diversity structure within the organization. And then that's then incorporated into measures of steps that can be taken to improve things within the organization.
So two interesting approaches, weaving it into the almost the risk process itself, so that it's unavoidable and it's something that is a conversation that's had. And then equally, from Andrew, from you mentioning making sure that people understand that they're being listened to, and that they're being encouraged to be vocal and that you are listening. Essentially, it's almost like a simplistic thing that should be obvious, but is not in a lot of companies' cases, a lot of organizations' cases as well. Jen or John, any other takes from what you've seen?
Yeah.
Go ahead, John. Please.
So one of the things that we started to do was look at alternative recruitment methods as well. So, using more, obviously recruiting teams works, but we also tried to get into places like colleges and universities and actually had tables where we could meet people in person and then bring them on as paid interns or run hackathons, or actually get more of a better flavor for people who are actually starting off their career paths, and that helped us tremendously. And I think also shining a spotlight on the areas where you're not quite as comfortable, and working from within that way helped us amazingly.
John, you literally took the words out of my mouth. That's one of the things that we've been really trying to do is looking at the various backgrounds, but also the tech experience and looking at our own internal recruitment process. Maybe we've been too stringent about, the types of expectations that we have, and we need to be a little bit more open-minded. That's one of the things that I've noticed overall in the cyberspace is we're not attracting enough talent because of the expectations around experience and the expectations around knowledge set, which is all great. And you need to get to that point in order to support these companies. But it's almost like which comes first, the chicken or the egg? You need to be able to get into these jobs to develop experience before you actually have experience. So we've been really trying to look at the ways that we approach recruitment so that we can be a little bit more inclusive in the people that we talk to.
So both in each case, opening up to almost bridging that gap between, entry level and what seems to be the requirement at, the most junior level on a lot of companies' interests, in a lot of companies' regard, but it seems to require a skill set that is non-existent without that experience. So that's, again, something that seems to be something that is under-addressed, but almost like an obvious fix, but not necessarily an easy one. So yeah, I really appreciate that kind of broad, broad oversight from each side. I did have another question with regards to, I suppose, the way that you're approaching processes and interviewing from that sort of side of things. So, across the board, is there anything that you've seen outside of just like job requirements, eliminating a large percentage, for instance, female candidates to male candidates, applying statistically less when there's certain prerequisites for each job description? Is that something that you see during the process as well? Is there anything that perhaps organizations, or in each of your cases, and they're very different industries, Andrew, penetration test as a service, Jen, consulting with regards to kind of that incident response side of thing. Is there anything that's particularly unique to the type of industry that your company is in, but equally is something that's eliminating people within the process that can be done during that sort of while the conversation is being had? For instance, technical tests for people that perhaps will have had an underdeveloped skill set in something that they've not done, or basically something that is eliminating people before they've got in the door, but after that application stage, unique to your sort of space. Is there anything that you're kind of seeing across the board, and again, open to all?
I think there's just a general perception, right, that security or cybersecurity is so technical. It's just for a certain group of people. I'm just not going to participate. I don't think I have what it takes. Even societal norms have also established that some of these positions are perceived to be for men when it's necessarily not true, right? So I think combating that viewpoint certainly would help to expand the ability for folks to apply. Even when they have the skill set, they still doubt themselves because they feel based on the way this is worded, it just seems to be something to be a man's group or something of that extent. So I know a number of women that just look at job description, they send it to me like, oh, what do you think? I don't think I can do this. So you can send me do this. You have the skill set. I've walked through university. I know you're capable of doing it. So I think overcoming that fear or that self-doubt certainly would help. And from an organizational perspective, when creating an environment that makes people more comfortable to engage and apply for positions certainly helps. And writing job description that in a way that makes people feel included, or yeah, I could certainly participate in this. Scaling down some of the technical requirements, or most job descriptions where you see when you eventually get that role, 60% of what's there you really don't even do because of your job there. So some people take the pride of just writing, putting a lot of different things that may not be relevant, and these things end up being a deterrent for some people. So I think taking the time to really evaluate these job descriptions as you put it out there and make sure it's inclusive enough, a lot of people across multiple backgrounds to apply certainly will be helpful in that regard too.
Yeah.
There you go.
I was just going to say, so I currently run 2 different departments. I run compliance, which is GRC, governance, risk, and compliance, and then I run IT. And so recently we had a couple of jobs open, and I saw a significant more amount of women apply for my compliance department roles. In fact, I ended up hiring 2 women in my compliance team. But when I opened up IT recs, and this is for a support engineer, system engineer, whatever, I actually saw like a huge number of men and hardly any women apply for that role. And so like when you start breaking down cybersecurity, because it's super vague, right? Like as we all know that cybersecurity really encompasses so many things now. It's not what it used to be, like the hacker with the hat pulled over, that was a man that was like typing away. It's all of these different things that, you know, kind of come up with cybersecurity. And so you start to see that for the different paths that happen, where you may see more men over women or more women over men for each of these different roles. And I just wanted to call that out, something I actually witnessed just recently with my open recs that I had.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
one thing I'm noticing a lot as well is people really hate whiteboard style interviews. Where, you know, you give someone a coding test, or you give someone some, you know, pen test results and ask to analyze them, or anything that's on a whiteboard. And if you look at, you know, multiple studies on this, it encourages a formalized educational response. And if you don't have that for, you know, lack of opportunities, it also discourages people who have anxiety issues. It discourages, there's so many things it does badly. And I think eliminating that from a lot of interviews is a massive barrier for entry for people with not quite the great experience to start with. Encouraging them to get into your workflow and begin that process of actually learning instead of just blowing them off right at the interview process.
Yeah, I mean, I think for me, work ethic is the biggest thing that I look for when I'm interviewing people. I want to get a good sense of where they're at from a work ethic perspective, because if they have a really strong work ethic, I know they're going to be loyal, they're going to be detail oriented, they're going to be focused, they're going to be willing to learn. That to me trumps pretty much everything else. So as a result, I've been able to attract a lot of diverse people because I'm not looking for, you know, the average experience level or the average technical level. Yeah.
Focus on the intangibles, essentially,
Yeah.
in between the technical
Well,
stuff.
and we're trying to build a culture that's very family oriented. And to me, that means, okay, we all want to see this company succeed. So we're going to work really hard, but we also want to have an open door policy where we can all talk about anything that's going on from the day to day, so that everybody feels like they're an equal part in the overall success of the company.
Thanks, Jen. So I think combine some really, yeah, you know, some really inclusive ways of targeting and attracting that right talent, and something that a lot of companies do struggle with in terms of addressing that matter of scaling and really kind of where square one is in the sense of building that more diverse team and setting the right foot forward. I'm just conscious of time. I know we are coming up towards the end of our allotted slot. So I suppose I just wanted to kind of close out really with any sort of final thoughts and go around the group in terms of just underlining some key points, I guess, that you'd love for our audience to take home with regards to this matter today.
Yeah, so I have kind of two pathways to talk about. One being leadership and one being self. So leadership, if you're attending this webinar, take these things away that we talked about today and evaluate how can you apply this at your organization. What are the things that you can change based on the things that we've gone through or the things that we're doing at our own organizations, and take steps to actually make that happen. Advocate for these changes and push them through to the end. Now, on the other side, it's not enough that leadership takes care of it. If you're on this call and you are trying to, like, you're entry level, you're trying to break in, or you're trying to do whatever, these are the things that I would say to you: have courage, be okay with being uncomfortable, because sometimes it is uncomfortable advocating for yourself. Be vulnerable, be transparent. And if you need somebody to support you, there are tons of groups available. So maybe you don't have a mentor in your org. There are so many groups available, women in cybersecurity, all these different InfoSec things going on. I highly encourage you to do that. If you're uncomfortable with doing that, this is my sincere offer. I welcome anybody to contact me directly. I am more than happy to mentor, to coach, to do whatever, to help you get to wherever you need to go, because I did not have that for the longest time. And every time that I can pay it forward, I know that it has a ripple effect into the cybersecurity world. So those are my takeaways for this group. Take these things, go try to act on them. And if you are just not in that position, then look for a mentor or someone who can lift you up to get to that point.
Right. So for me, I would just say that, if you're part of this, the key takeaway for me is that diversity is not just a good to have kind of thing. There are real benefits to the organization. I mean, from my personal perspective, my team is very diverse, and having that diverse opinions, different perspectives certainly helps in our decision-making process. So if you're part of this and you're looking to hire, you're looking to build a team, taking diversity seriously, there's real benefit for your organization. It shouldn't be seen as, as a buzzword, everyone is doing it, now let's do it. But there's real benefit to you if you do it and you do it the right way. So I would encourage folks to really look deep into that and build your team along those lines. A tremendous benefit in having a diverse team as against having everyone look the same way, think the same way.
So from my perspective, I would say a couple of things. One, any organization that is watching this webinar, I hope at least the takeaway that I have and that I wanted to project is the fact that diversity helps you differentiate yourself in the market. If you don't have diversity, then you are really just staying stagnant. You're not creating new ideas, and you're leaving a lot of opportunity for you and for the individual to really make an impact on a really interesting market. The other thing is, the thing that I keep coming back to for myself over the last, several months is visibility is so important. So leaders, if you're in this space, be visible, be more vocal, be somebody who wants to be a mentor to other individuals who are trying to get ahead and maybe just don't have that person to take them under their wing. It's so important that we are out there and we advocate for other people. But also the flip side of that is, as an individual who does represent a diverse group, I think it's super important that you go out there and you fight for yourself. And, maybe you find somebody like Rose or myself that you want to help mentor you. Speak up, talk to us about that, because that is just as important for you to be able to advocate for yourself as it is for other people to advocate for you. So I'm going to second what Rose said. If there's anybody who's been on this webinar who's looking for somebody to help mentor them, I'm more than happy to be a part of that.
Also amazing thought so far. For me, I think that my big key here is don't make diversity an afterthought. Don't wait till someone points out the lack of diversity in an organization before you take action. Have the meetings, have the discussions, have the insights, KPIs, scorecards, whatever you need to identify them early on. And also reduce barriers to entry as much as possible. I know that people want the brightest and the best, and that's a great goal. But the brightest and the best doesn't necessarily mean that they come from a cookie cutter set of life background. So look wider than your net right now and try and encourage more people to take up entry level all the way through to leadership roles in the organization. There's massive benefits, financial, employee turnover is down. If you look at cognitive diversity, then problem solving abilities go up. There's so many benefits for their organization in this space.
Thank you so much, all, and I think some incredible insight for our audience today, and I really appreciate you all joining us. Rose, Andrew, Jen, John, thank you so much. Justin, I'll hand back over to you, but yeah, really appreciate everyone joining us this morning.
Thank you so much. This is great.
Thank you for having us.
Yeah, thank you.
Great session, and Rose, Jen, thanks so much for offering to be mentors to people. I think that's something so important, to mentor other people. I'm sure Harry and John, you'll do the same, and Jacob, but having somebody who says to you, you can go there, you can do more if that's what you want, is very important. And I hope people who are listening in today will take on board the message you have, but also that very kind offer from you. Look, I really appreciate that personally. So look, absolutely great session there. Jacob and Broadgate, thank you so much for bringing together this this great set of people. I really appreciated that. Sadly, I have to actually wrap up now. You're actually part of a larger panel or larger group of people we had today. We spoke about cyber risk. We spoke about quantifying risk and looking at operational cyber risks. We looked at crypto and AML, and we had this excellent session on cyber. Obviously, this is a conversation we want to continue, even though I'm a risk manager and I now am CEO of Premia. I came up through cyber myself, so I did computer science in Ireland in the 90s, which somehow turned out to be a good decision to make, and I ended up working in cyber for a few years before I made an odd decision and went to work in other areas. But to all our listeners at home, thank you so much for being here. To our panelists, thank you so much. To our sponsors, Dell, to RiskLens, to Broadgate for that diversity panel, and to AIMA, who are our media sponsors, thank you so much. And I also ask you to support Premia. So we are 20 years old now. We are a professional body for risk managers globally. Actually, mentoring is one of the programs we have. We have, I believe, 300 mentors and mentees at the moment, and it's a way that people give back, and that's something that I heard from the final panel. Some of us in some professions, I know it's terrible to say, people like to climb the ladder and close the gate behind them. I think we should encourage other people to come into our profession, and risk management is sometimes seen to be odd. I don't know how many of you used to watch Friends, but remember when they weren't quite sure what Chandler did in his job? I think I'm that person where my family go, well, he's a risk manager, we don't know what that means, and so on. But look, if you're interested in Premia, we are a 50,000 person network around the world. I encourage you to go to premia.org and look at joining us. And as I said, mentoring is part of what we do. So this has been a really excellent day. We're just coming up at 5:30 here in the Republic of Ireland, where I am. I think I'm not quite sure what time it is in the States, but I encourage you to think about risk management. Cyber is an area that is, whether you're practitioners, whether you're risk managers, need to know more about. I know I've been taking a lot of notes today, and I'm going to be following up with a lot of cyber training and cyber risk work that we're going to be doing. And you know, if you're not already a Premia member, I encourage you to join. And I'm working on our, I'm 45, and my son keeps telling me, because I look at Instagram, that I'm looking at TikTok for old people. But I'm working on our social media, so I'll practice one of my things, which is sustaining members get more. So do join Premia, become a member. We really enjoy that. And I think we're going to close out now. Thank you to those who came all the way through the journey with us, and to especially Jacob, Rose, Harry, Jen, and John. I really enjoyed that last event. It taught a crotchety old man a few lessons, and I hope to talk to you all again soon. And thank you, and good night.
Thank you.
Thanks.